I'm David Canning. I'm Head of Digital Knowledge and Information Management in the Cabinet Office. The digital heap is a phenomenon which has occurred since we went digital with our records management, and not just in government but in every sector. It's an uncontrolled and largely unorganised volume of digital files and other information which accumulate in data systems if you don't look after them and if you don't have a pipeline out to deal with it. So the challenge for us, and it's in common with every other government department, is how to create those pipelines to move the data from where it is, accumulating in uncontrolled spaces, through a process so that we can control it and we can review it for its value and make a decision about retention, either to throw it away if we don't need it anymore or to send it eventually to the National Archive. There's a tension in the legislation between keeping things for the record and making sure that we throw things away at the right moment so that we don't over-retain information. And one of the main challenges there is GDPR data protection. So if we're holding personal information for too long or beyond its retention date, technically we might be acting unlawfully, so we've got to make sure that we avoid that. So what you need in any situation is a retention policy that tells you when to throw certain things away, what to keep, and the means to apply it. And the difficulty with digital information is that the volume is so high that actually it can be sometimes very difficult to apply a retention policy even if you've got one. Because you've got to know where your data is, you've got to know what it's about, you've got to know what it contains. And in digital that's quite hard to do in high volumes. So you need an approach, a system that will allow you to achieve those things. Automated Intelligence has a product which allows us to achieve the analysis that we need for our digital collections. It works really quickly, but some of the great features it has are things like data visualization. So it has a really good dashboard that we can use to look at the results of analysis that we've run. But the other thing which is quite key for us is that it works with Elasticsearch so that we can actually create automated processing within the tool, and that saves a huge amount of time and effort. Once we've run that processing, the policy rules that DATALIFT has within the system allows us to make very, very rapid execution of results. So what the tool will do is it will tell us, here are the records of value, here are the records that are not of value, and with a little bit of checking and dip sampling to make sure that we've got the right answer, we can just press a button and the whole thing will delete the stuff that we don't want to keep anymore and preserve the stuff that we do. That speed is really important to us because we are talking about very large data volumes and government doesn't have endless resources to throw at this. The bill in terms of costs, if we had to look at every single document in our system, is enormous and we just don't have the resources. So what DATALIFT does is it allows us to do things really quickly and relatively cheaply. We don't have to deploy very large numbers of people to review documents. So to give you an example, one of the repositories that we pointed it at had something over 11 million files in it. And we did some time in motion studies to just figure out how long would it take us if we looked at all this stuff manually, if you like, with human eyes. How many people would I need to read all this stuff to make decisions about it? And the figure came out at it would take one person 59 years to read all of the documents in the system and make a judgment about it. We can't employ 59 people in a year. The pay bill for that would be millions of pounds, and we haven't got 59 years to play with. We've got to make a decision about this stuff within the next few years in order to make a decision about whether it goes to the National Archives. What we had to do was automate. And that's what it allows us to do. It allows us to automate and really run through this data very, very quickly with the existing resources we've got. And so when you look at cost avoidance, that saved us, as I say, several million pounds in cost that we would probably had to have faced at some point in the future anyway. The next step for us really is, having kind of got control of this heap, and we've built the pipelines to kind of process the data through the system from when it gets created all the way through to where it gets disposed of. We are building preservation for our most valuable records, and that's just about to go live. But the next step for us is actually what we do prior to transferring the material to the National Archive, which is we have to review everything for sensitivity. And by sensitivity, what I mean is that we must be sure that what we're about to put into the public domain isn't going to be damaging to the national interest. Again, we have to read it all, and there's still quite a high volume. The 11 million files that we had in that repository I talked about earlier, thanks to the work we've done using DATALIFT, we've managed to whittle that down to just over 3 million. So that's still 3 million files that we think are valuable records that we're going to have to read and review at some point before they go to the National Archive, and that's still a big task. We can't use the current coding that we've created for that, because all that does is it tells us whether it's valuable or not. What we have to do is understand whether it's potentially sensitive, and that's a judgment call that sometimes only human beings can make. We want to work with our colleagues across government on a technological solution for that, and there are some exciting developments coming out through artificial intelligence that we might be able to use, and so we want to look at that next. But it's a very similar problem, but it's not exactly the same problem. But that's where it's going to have to go next, is how do we use technology, and particularly AI, to review the context of records and understand what's actually going on in there, and if we released it now, what impact would it have on the wider world and government interests.